On the dusty border roads, a chance encounter with a stranger may change everything at the Lazy R Ranch. Along one of the nomadic roads of the borderland, a horse ambled at a road gate. The rider sat the saddle with the careless ease of long habit. He was in no hurry. While he jogged along, his mind milled over a detail of a recent incident not precisely clear to him. A shimmer of heat danced above the sun-scorched plain. Now and again a dust eddy, an inverted cone, whirled across the desert sand. The vegetation had stamped upon it the stark gray look of life that has fought to endure. The clumps of chala and prickly pear bristled with thorny defiance. The whole-pecked saguaros were like grim old sentinels ready to succumb to years. Even the Apache plumes were dry and desiccated. There was something fantastic about the jigsaw line of hills standing against the horizon, as though they had no depth and substance, but were a papier-mâché stage property without genuine reality. Why had an instant dislike flared up in him at sight of Ramsay Brennan, the rider asked himself. Before the man had said a word, before the insult of the offered silver, he had known they were to be enemies. The feeling still existed, and it was unreasonable. Was there not room in this wide world for each to go his own way and never meet the other? The road ribbon wound up a hill shoulder and dropped abruptly to cross an arroyo. Beside a sandy wash a small car stood. One wheel was jacked up and a spare tire leaned against the running board. From the interior of the car a pair of shapely legs projected. The owner of them seemed to be searching for a tool. Judging by the fervent "damn" he heard, the horseman guessed she was not finding it. "Have you lost something?" he asked politely. A slim body and a brown boyish head emerged from within. The look that swept over him was keen and swift. "My temper," she said shortly. "May I help you find it?" She smiled, and he observed that the amber eyes beneath the dark lashes became warm as molten gold. "You have," she told him. He swung from the saddle, dropped the bridle reins to the ground, and came forward. Both of them took it for granted that it was his job to change the tire. Inside of 10 minutes he had the last bolt tightened. He removed the jack and replaced it with the other tools underneath the seat. The girl had been watching him, curious in spite of herself. His worn clothes proclaimed him a cowpuncher, but he did not look like an ordinary waddy. What was it about him that gave the impression almost of distinction? Was it the careless good looks? The poised grace with which he carried himself? The expression so recklessly sardonic and yet so engaging? "Are you with some outfit near here?" she asked. "I don't think I've seen you before." "I'm riding the chuck line," he said lightly, as though his bread and butter were a matter of the least consequence in the world. She frowned, studying him. The man was competent. That was stamped all over him. What was wrong with him, then? Why did he have to go to a country where he was not known to look for a job? How explain the discrepancy between the apparent facts and that manner he had of riding the top wave? "Where do you come from?" she asked curtly. He waved a hand that might include all the points of the compass in its circuit. "Where did you work last?" she insisted. "I fixed a lady's tire on the Palo Duro Road," he said blandly. "Which reminds me, I haven't thanked you, and I do." "Pleasure was mine," he drawled. "I'm not just being inquisitive," she went on. "If you're looking for work, I know of a place." "I'm looking for the kind of work I'm looking for," he answered, smiling at her. "Do you drink?" she wanted bluntly to know. "I thought this was a prohibition country." "You're going at it a queer way to get a job," she said coldly. "I need a man myself to help on a guest ranch I run near here, but if I employ you, I'll have to know more about you." "Yes, ma'am," he admitted. A change had come over him. His manner had taken on the simulation of the humility of labor looking for employment after many rebuffs. It was apparent even in his voice. But the eyes were still full of gay impudence. "Why did you leave your last place?" "Had a few words with the boss, ma'am. He canned me, gave me my time." "You oughtn't to be looking for work, a man like you. You can ride and rope, I suppose." "Yes, ma'am." She made a characteristic swift decision. "I own the Lazy R, it's 3 miles up the road. I'll give you $60 a month and board to ride for me." The question he asked seemed irrelevant. "Do you know a man called Ramsay Brennan?" "He's my foreman." "Why?" "Oh, nothing." "Do you know him?" "Met him this morning, ma'am." He went back to the order of the day. "You've hired a hand. All right. Report to Mr. Brennan." She nodded a little farewell and got into the car. "Who shall I say hired me?" he asked. "Lee Reynolds." "What is your name?" "Call me Slim, ma'am." "I prefer to call you by your name, if you're not ashamed of it." She gave him a look severe with reproof. What right had he to mock her with this pretense of humbleness, with this relapse into the voice and manner of an unlettered cowpuncher? She did not propose to put up with any nonsense from him. If he worked for her, he would find that out. He could reserve his humor for the other boys in the bunkhouse. Yes, ma'am. There was a momentary hesitation before he suggested Smith. John K. Smith, he added an instant later. That was not his name, of course. She knew that. The way he had almost chuckled over it told her so. But she was a product of the Old West which carefully refrained from curiosity about a stranger's past. Very well, since that name suits you, it does me. Her foot touched the starter. The car moved down the road. The man who had adopted the cognomen of Smith crossed the dusty track to his horse. I shouldn't wonder, Blaze, he drawled to the animal, if there wasn't fireworks around the lil' boss once in a while. The silky nose of the horse nuzzled his shoulder. And her foreman is Mr. Ramsay Brennan. Well, I reckon he's going to be real pleased to meet the new Lazy R rider. Dipping down into the valley where the windmills of the Lazy R flashed sun signals at her, Lee Reynolds took herself to task. Now, why did you do that? She asked herself. Why did you hire that impudent, good-looking young scamp? There's something wrong about him. There must be. You deliberately insulted him, to make him fly up and get angry, and he didn't. He stood for it. Why, you've probably bought trouble, Miss Reynolds. Whyfor did you do it? She did not know why. Her offer had been born of one of her fool impulses, as she called them. Ramsay would not like it. She knew that. He would feel she was infringing on his rights as foreman. Lee shrugged her shoulders. If Ramsay did not like it, he could do the other thing. She had a crow to pick with him, anyhow, on another matter. Lee drove into the courtyard of the Lazy R and left the car under the shade of a huge live oak. In the corral 3 men were busy with some wild young colts. Ramsay back yet, Dunk? She called to one of them. An old man came to the fence and answered. No, Miss Lee, he ain't. Will you tell him when he comes I want to see him? Sure will. He watched her walking to the house, a light, trim figure that moved without effort, springily, as a young deer does. She was a recent product of an Eastern finishing school, but that free gait had found its genesis in the untamed heart of the girl. It was an expression of her spirit. Old Dunk Daggett's eyes followed her with a pride in them he did not attempt to conceal. Ever since she had been a baby he had served first her father and then her. He had taught her to ride and to rope and to shoot. She was the ewe lamb he cherished above all living things. Something seldom about that girl, he boasted to the perspiring youth who joined him at the fence. Kansas mopped his face with the sleeve of the shirt he wore. It don't hurt a fellow's eyes any to look at her, he agreed. Funny about her. She's pretty as a new painted wagon, but she ain't what you'd call feminine in her ways. Me, I like a girl that waits for a fellow to take the lead, a girl. Humph, snorted Daggett, who cares what you like? Why, you can't even rope a bronc. You don't know nothing but a brakeman, call yourself a cowboy, and just now missed your throw 3 times. In my time you would have been in a livery stable. If there were any good top hands left, I'd certainly send all you corral dogs hightailin' to town. But the country ain't what it usta be. I don't claim to be a champion roper, Kansas demurred. That ain't what we was talkin' about, anyhow. I claimed Miss Lee was a right nice good-lookin' girl, but in no ways feminine. You can't tell me different either. Why, if she sent Ramsay down the road tomorrow, she could darn near run the ranch as well as he does. Better, the old man cried, in the high falsetto that always seemed on the edge of excitement. A doggone sight better. Lemme tell you about that girl, young fellow, me lad. Dialogue continues through ranch lore, backstory, and admiration of Lee's spirit. Next time, tensions rise as the new rider meets Ramsay Brennan, and secrets from the past begin to surface. Episode 3 awaits. Love the Wild West adventure? Hit subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next ride beyond the Rio Grande.